It's time for the Daily Stand Up Podcast presented by Agile Dad with your host, Lee Henson. Without any further ado, let's get started. I often get questions from people who are either struggling with Scrum or people who are trying to embrace Kanban. And the question is, how do we manage discovery or delivery work if we're trying to use a Kanban flow? Because some of these things lend themselves more easily to fit into a Scrum workflow than a Kanban flow. So, how do we manage those, and what should we be looking for, and how should we be addressing these things? And I think that's a very valid question. So, you have to start by understanding that a typical Kanban board, you're going to have a starting point, a definition of how your workflow is, a finish point. You're going to be measuring things like cycle time. How long does it take to do one of something? Throughput. How many can you do in a deliverable amount of time? And a work item age to make sure that you can keep track of cumulative flow to make sure things aren't getting stuck in any one of the different cycles. And you want to make sure you're monitoring your WIP, limiting work in progress. Those are the key core essential things that need to be measured. But on a Kanban board, you could literally have discovery work, development work, and delivery work. So when I'm talking about discovery work, that's like research to figure something out, whether it's the right thing to do first or build for the customer. Maybe we're doing some experiments or some prototyping, trying to get things hammered out, trying to figure out what we actually need to do. It's very wise to do experiments when we have insufficient evidence so we can harvest the proposed value. Because at the end of the day, our work items are bets, probably at best, right? We're wagering that we're doing the right thing. I don't want to say that it falls into opinion, because opinion, I think, is taking it a little too far. But I do want to say that it's an experiment. And I think that it's easy for us to get overwhelmed and just fill our funnel with stuff that we have to get done. So there's no evidence to support it, and you end up building things that don't have the support behind why you're building what you're building. So instead of trying to just focus exclusively on delivery, we need to have some type of focus on ideation and discovery. I talk a lot about this in my Scrum training classes. So if you're trying to say, okay, then separate it from development. Development is physically building or making your product or service. Discovery is identifying targeted personas and doing the research necessary to make sure that you understand what the MVP is and that you're building the right thing. Delivery is about getting that work that we have made completed and giving it to the end consumer, getting through that release cycle. So it kind of combines delivery and release into one cycle. So if you think about Kanban and flow, there are literally four time horizons that you need to take into consideration. The first one is discovering the next best thing. Anyone who says that discovery is not part of this is sorely mistaken. You need to have discovery in order for you to understand what you should be doing. Then developing what we know. And if we have evidence that something is the right thing to do, have we identified our targeted persona? Have we built out a path? Have we done some mapping to support what we're trying to do? Then there's delivering the stuff that we have set the stage to deliver and for the consumer to consume. And then finally, it's making sure the release goes smoothly and looking back on previous releases that we've done and how it impacted our markets. How did it actually make a difference? Did it change customer behaviors? Did we reap some organizational value or technical value? Did we improve our reputation as an organization? Did we improve the reputation of our product? Do we improve employee satisfaction? Did we reduce our plastic footprint, if that's where you are? Do we reduce our carbon footprint? I think you get where I'm going with this, right? So when you think about it, what you do with your work should definitely be inclusive as part of the horizon, as part of what you're trying to do. So if you're sitting in the debate, should it be Kanban or should it be Scrum? In Kanban, a backlog literally is optional. Unlike in Scrum, where it's mandatory to have a backlog, it's an artifact. In Kanban, you can just have a funnel where it's first in, first out, And some people might call this a backlog for a backlog. It's the precursor. So either way, you're going to end up creating a container that defines the definition of your workflow. So in my world, when I talk a lot about organizations embracing Scrumban, what I'm trying to say is there are certain things that fall easily into a backlog. There are other things that you need to plan as if there were a backlog, but not necessarily create a hardline backlog for that work. That's the more Kanban flow. And you put those two together, voila, you have Scrumban, where you're taking a percentage of your allocated story points and set those aside specifically to do things that need to be done. And the remainder of your story points go towards taking on those items in a first in, first out workflow. That resonates. That makes sense, right? That clicks. But there are multiple patterns available for managing the 4 time horizons. The thing is that we manage what type of work it is as opposed to who is going to be doing the work. Now, I preach this forever. If you start worrying about who's going to finish your work and who's going to deliver the value and who's building the thing, you're setting yourself up for immediate failure. And a modern team that's trying to practice true business agility, one would hope that people are trying to learn other skills, that they're trying to expand their horizon. The reality is, people who do discovery have a lot of work to do. And there are usually fewer people who have the skills to do that discovery than to do the actual work. People who do discovery are often coaching, mentoring, teaching, and willing volunteers who want to learn how to do the discovery and figure out how things work. For example, someone doing development might be invited to a customer interview just to take notes or gain an appreciation of what the customer and end user really wants and what they're struggling with. Another example might be a developer who is asked to do some lo-fi prototype, perhaps maybe in practicing their skills doing a customer interview, because we need to have that open communication, right? And we need to make sure that people are talking to each other and that the people who are technical have good listening skills just as well as the people who are asking for things. So it brings to mind a story I once heard about someone who I had an opportunity to come in contact with, John Carter. He was the inventor of Bose noise canceling headphones. He said in a test shop that they had in Bose, when they had people come into the music store, they were purely observing where the customer goes, not pointing them to the new innovation. They were just seeing if they pick it up and what they do with it and what they discover. And lo and behold, instead of discovering what customers wanted to improve about the sound quality and fidelity, they liked the idea of noise cancellation. Noise canceling headphones were discovered by accident, through an accident of innovation. And if you think about those types of things, how many other things have been created by way of innovation of an accident, right? So in reality, most innovation comes from experimentation. And I think that sometimes we don't carve out the time to do discovery and to figure out how to do that experimentation. The challenge is there's just so much discovery work that we could do, and discovery is never really finished because the people who are doing discovery are also involved in doing usability and trying to figure out whether what we have is the right thing. So it becomes a cyclical loop. And they're always trying to analyze what's going on after the work's been released. So they're analyzing market positioning, analyzing how people are interacting with the product, whether people are continuing to use or drop out. So this is going to sound really interesting, but the solution to this is to make sure that the product owner has a supporting cast that they call a dynamic trio. The recommended recipe is a technical person, a person who's more astute in customer orientation or consumer orientation, like a design person, and someone who understands strategically where the product or service is going. If you're scratching your head right now going, wait a minute, that's a ba-fa-ta. Ding, ding, ding. I've been teaching this for years. It's exactly what we're talking about. So you should make sure that you have a place in your workflow for ideation, a place for discovery, discovering the MVP, discovering the persona, laying out how you're going to map things, then focus on delivery, and then focus on release and feedback. Measure and tweak, inspect and adapt, do the things you need to do. Focus on the 20% of the features that the consumer actually uses instead of the 80% that people think that they should build for the consumer without asking the consumer what they really need. So if we're doing a Kanban board, the goal is we don't want to keep swimming backwards. The swim lanes are designed to swim forward, and we need to make sure that we're aligning our work in such a way that we are not falling into traps where we have to create cycles going backwards. And sometimes that means we have to be careful and mindful about splitting items, about combining items. We need to make sure we understand exactly where we're trying to go with the flow, how that flow is impacting, and how we can couple the work that needs to be done to keep the lights on with the work that's expected for us to be done and make sure that we're delivering value continually. That's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have a topic you want us to discuss, learn more at agiledad.com. We'd love to hear from you. As always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.